So I have the privilege of working in the same corridor as Professor Hitendra Pillay, who has worked in so many different countries, helping their leaders do educational reform. So Hitendra, you were just saying that you were in one country last week. How many different countries have you worked in, do you think?
I think it's about, the last count was 34.
All right. So you have a lot of experience in leading, in thinking about leadership and the kind of leadership that brings change. And we were talking before that it's not a recipe and the same kind of leadership is not going to work in each country. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that?
We leaders are basically people who are more, I would say, blue sky. They're basically thinking well ahead of what's today. So they're about 4 or 5 steps ahead of what's happening now. So the old saying, the architect's dream is an engineer's nightmare. It's the same thing, the leader's dream is a manager's nightmare, because they've got to operationalize. You find most of the corporate organizations, the CEOs are more visionary, then you've got a whole sort of support staff that does the actual management and implementation.
I know though you're saying that you don't have to have an authoritative position to be a leader. Leadership can happen at a more grassroots level as well, but it requires wisdom. Do you want to just explain what you think the wisdom
Yes,
ingredient is?
To be a leader at any level, you got to have a much broader understanding of the environment and what you're doing and what's it about. Otherwise you become very much operational and task-based. To be able to see the bigger picture, and that comes with a bit of maturity. And as I mentioned to you earlier, the 2 responses from Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates in terms of when they were asked by Bloomberg to say one thing that they would do in the world if they had the opportunity. Mark was looking at trying to connect the whole world so that they're all connected, which is a reasonable thing to want to do. Whereas Bill Gates wanted to immunize just about every child. They both are IT engineers, they both are rich people, they're both in the IT industry, but their views are very different. Then that's a classic example of maturity in the statement made by Bill Gates, whereas again, wanting to change the world, but in a very different way by Mark. So wisdom gives you that sort of depth to understand the bigger issues rather than what's immediately your sort of personal needs.
So what do you think is a path to that leadership wisdom?
Same thing. If you have a lot of mental models, you have the luxury of picking and choosing and bouncing one off the other. But if you have very limited mental models, then you have problems. And it's the same as, the more you have, the better decisions you can make.
One of your many skills is that idea of monitoring and evaluating and being able to have a look at data to see what's going on. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that?
There's 2 things in there. One is, as you said, ability to listen. A good leader is somebody who would be very good at listening, and again bringing it about what you're actually listening and what you know, and also take back and then reflect on it and look at what sort of evidence you have to verify things that you were in the discussion and how it can be moved forward. But very often people make decisions while they're in the meeting and in the discussion, which is very rushed. And I know today's world is sort of rushed for time. People do that, but that's always a risk. So I look at some of the sort of future design stuff that I advise the World Bank and ADB on. At the same time, I also look at the implementation design. And then I sometimes go back and look at the monitoring stages to see whether they're doing what they're supposed to do. But that, I guess, is not something that most people would have the privilege. So I'm just fortunate, I guess, but it'd be good to have the both sides to it, because then you can follow through. But
so can you think of a situation where you've observed or been part of a change process and it was really well done and really effective? Why it might have been effective?
Let me think. I was recently involved in a project in Sri Lanka and one in Bangladesh, and they both, as you said, basically the success was based on the team that worked, and also of course the team leader. So that's because of the engagement at the grassroots. They managed to talk and understand the whole dynamics of the system. So whenever they were challenged, they could defend their position.
Okay.
Because if you can't convince your beneficiaries or your client base that you're trying to lead, you're not going to get very far. And sometimes that's not easy, but that's the solution. If you got to spend time to understand the context of people so that they buy into whatever you're advocating as a leader.
So I'm hearing deep thinking and understanding of the context, sharing that vision with the people who you want to engage, a team approach. Is there anything else that comes to mind?
I guess one of the things that I keep saying, which is probably a variation in terms of being humble. A leader doesn't have to be arrogant and loud. The smart leaders are who are quieter, but they get the work done.
I'm sure that is going to be very reassuring from a lot of people listening who may have struggled to think of themselves as a leader because they don't want to be loud, they don't want to be in conflict, but they want to work to change things.
Because I agree. I'm probably one of them. I'm much quieter. I do not confront people. If I can get things done without having to confront people, I would work out a way around it. I think that's probably a good sign of a good leader, is being able to, get things done without having to change the whole dynamics of the group or the team that you're working with.
Working with people rather than trying to...
Listening to them. Listening to them and trying to use their strength and help them move things.
Jendra, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. I've drawn strength from your wisdom, so thank you.
Thank you.